All right, this is the third lecture for the 4th century, and this is going to be a fairly short one. I just want to talk about the stories behind the baptism of Constantine, and I also want to give you a bit more detail on the spreading of Arianism. I know I talked about that in the last lecture, but I want to give you a slide and show you some of the details. So we know in 337, Emperor Constantine started feeling poorly, and so what he ended up doing is traveling around to various sites trying to make himself feel better. And what he ended up doing is dying in 337, but this was after he was baptized. So this isn't all that unusual for Christians in the ancient world to wait until their deathbed to be baptized. The idea behind that is that you've been sinning your entire life, you get baptized on your deathbed, and then you can go into heaven free of sin. So this is what Constantine was doing. Now, the big question is who baptized Constantine? So we have a number of sources who do not tell us this. So the first one is Eusebius of Caesarea. In his life of Constantine, he just says that Constantine was baptized, but doesn't give the name of the bishop, and this is in the city of Nicomedia. You've got Socrates Scholasticus, who says that Constantine gave his last will and testament to someone who was a supporter of Arius, but he doesn't mention the name of who baptized Constantine. Sozomen repeats the exact same story, and if you read Theodoret, he doesn't give a name either. And this is kind of unusual because you'd think that Constantine, who is the most famous early Christian, extremely important because he was the first Christian emperor, who baptized him. So early writers are not saying. However, one does, and this is Jerome. He was living in the late 300s, early 400s, and he says that it was done by Eusebius of Nicomedia, the Arian bishop. So this is probably the reason why many early Christian historians would not write the name down. They probably knew who baptized Constantine, but refused to acknowledge it, that it was an Arian, Eusebius. So this is after all the issues and contentions that had happened during the time of Constantine, that he was baptized into Arian Christianity. This also led, the non-telling of the name also led to some interesting artwork later in the 1500s. What you're looking at is part of a painting called The Baptism by Bishop Sylvester. And what you've got is Sylvester here, who was the Pope in Rome, or the Bishop of Rome. And then you've got a very young-looking Constantine. He was actually 65 when he died. And so this particular artwork is telling the story that he went to Rome and got baptized by the bishop. Now, this is absolutely false. He did not go to Rome to be baptized, and certainly wasn't baptized by Sylvester. But people, even living in the 1500s, did not want to acknowledge or did not know that Constantine was baptized by Eusebius of Nicomedia. One thing I do want to sort of give a little funny story here, and one way to remember these differences between Arianism and Catholic, or what we call the Nicene faith. Nicene faith and Catholic faith are exactly the same. All throughout the 300s, and I had mentioned this before, you've got the Arians and the Catholics not getting along at all. And a couple of years ago, Taylor Swift's We Are Never Ever Getting Back Together came out. And for some reason, the first thing that popped into my mind as I was listening to this song are the differences between the Arians and the Catholics and how they will never, ever get together. And what I've done here, and I hope I didn't ruin this song for you, I've given you here a few of the lyrics, and again, it sounds like someone is telling the history of early Christianity here. We're never ever getting back together. You go talk to your friends, then you talk to my friends, talk to me, but we're never getting back together like ever. And I've given you here the YouTube link to Taylor Swift's We're Never Getting Back Together in case you want to listen to this, but it'll help you remember a little bit about the conflicts that were going on between these two groups. Now, this is not the end. So Emperor Constantine was baptized, and then he ends up dying in 337. In 339, Eusebius of Nicomedia becomes the most powerful bishop in the eastern part of the Roman Empire. He becomes the bishop of Constantinople, and he was bishop until 341. And what starts happening is that he starts placing Arian bishops in all of these major cities in the east. And while you've got the Western part of the Roman Empire, frantically trying to place Nicene or Catholic bishops in these same cities. So what you see is a large number of cities becoming Arian in the East. And I'd mentioned the three sons of Constantine, Constantius II, Constantine II, and Constans. And what I've done here is given you a little bit of information about where they're ruling. What's important to remember is that Constantius supported the Arian cause. So he was an Arian supporter. Constantine II, who was ruling in the West, he did not support the Arian cause. He was a Nicene believer. And then you've got Constant. So he had to deal with Arianism. He didn't rule, well, he actually ruled longer than one of his brothers, but it's really Constantius II who continues this argument between the Nicenes and the Arians. Okay, and just a little bit about the spread of Arianism beyond. So I had mentioned that Eusebius of Nicomedia was, or you could say Eusebius of Constantinople now, was exiled. And so he ended up meeting a Christian named Ulfilas. And Ulfilas was a barbarian, or someone who comes from outside of the Roman Empire. He met Eusebius of Nicomedia, met a number of other Christians, and was ultimately ordained by Eusebius of Nicomedia, who of course was Arian. So Ulfilas then goes back to his home territory and converts a whole bunch of people to Arian Christianity. Now I'd mentioned that in the 400s and 500s you have this big push of barbarians into the Western Roman Empire, and as they arrived, they were Christian, but they were Arian. So you've got Theodoric, who was an Ostrogothic king in Italy, an Arian. You've got the Franks, who ultimately, their kingdom ultimately becomes France. They're Arian in the beginning. The Visigoths in Spain, they were Arian in the very beginning. The Vandals in North Africa, they were Arian and stayed Arian until they were kicked out in the 500s. And you also had the Lombards, who were controlling northern Italy. They were Arian in the beginning. So Arianism continues to spread way beyond the time that we're actually talking about in our class. And then this is just a reminder, in the Nicene Creed, you've got homoousios, or the same substance. Now, what starts happening in the 300s in terms of Christology is that some people don't like this idea that Christ and God were of the same substance. So what you start seeing is another word being used, and this is homoousios. And what this means is God and Christ were of a similar substance. And there seems to be splitting hairs here, but again, this led to big debates in churches, among common people, about the nature of Christ or Christology.